This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Hey, Marcus House with you here. We have got it all today, my friends. Loads of Starship updates to dive right into, and another fun week with Starlink action as well. Yep, those are the V2 minis again. Vulcan Centaur takes another step towards its first flight, and NASA breaking communication records. Yeah, let's jump into all this.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
I think this week it is worth starting at the Massey's test site a little over 6 miles down the road from Starbase, Texas. This is a test location for SpaceX, still rapidly evolving, and a bunch happened here this week. First off, this test Booster 6 tank here. This here is made up from its forward and common dome sections, and this hole normally used for the downcomer that would typically feed liquid methane down to the engines was later sealed shut to allow this Frankenstein tank to be used for pressure testing instead. Of course, it was at one point supposed to become a full booster. However, we assume due to the many issues with Raptor 1.5, it was made obsolete. Quite a while back, it was manoeuvred here to the back of the Massey site at the aptly named burst pad. Well, it was indeed intended for a test to destruction, and that time came this week. It was swiftly filled up with water and... Now, hang on, that wasn't just a burst, was it? Let's just zoom in and check the slow-mo on that. Wait, was that an explosion? Yes, indeed it was, and great audio here from Anthony Gomez from the Rocket Ranch. We suspect that this has been a test of the Flight Termination System, or FTS upgrade. After all, the Starship flight test, now almost exactly a month ago, had the booster breaking apart over 40 seconds after the FTS was triggered. That was clearly undesirable, and that will be a big part of the flight investigation that the Federal Aviation Administration is going to want to see clearly addressed. Right after that explosion took place, the water immediately started gushing out, followed by the barrel section crumpling in right after. One thing to note here is that this test tank did not have any stringers on the inside of the tank wall, which would make this area crumple easier. After that though, the section of the bottom beneath the aft dome unzipped itself. Now that section there wasn't pressurized, and SpaceX added stringers there on the outside to give the barrel extra strength, just like they do on the flight-worthy boosters. So yeah, within a matter of a few seconds, this tank completely collapsed in on itself, leaving this bizarre shot from Starship Gazer. If you don't look closely, it looks like those tank parts are just hovering in the air. This test tank didn't sit here in this state for very long. The SpaceX crew flipped it over to take it away over the next day. Now, you may recall last week Ship 25 was being tested here at Massey's as well, but this week it was time at last to move it out. As is the typical procedure for a ship move, 2 self-propelled modular transporters made their way towards the vehicle, counterweights were repositioned, and the ship was hooked up to the temporary pressurization lines. It was ready to move. Now, with all this new concrete poured close to the ship testing stand here, it did make this job a lot easier and slightly less muddy than we've seen in the past. I'm sure that eventually most of the site will be covered in concrete. So Ship 25 departed the Massey site bound for Starbase, or maybe not. It did finally make its way onto Highway 4, however, it soon became clear that it was not meant to be. Soon after, back it moved towards Massey's. Yep, that was a tad confusing, but thankfully the next day it was back onto Highway 4, successfully this time passing the build site, making a beeline towards Starbase. Once it had arrived, it was placed right next to suborbital Pad B, where the LR-11000 SpaceX crane was back in action again. So why was the ship being lifted onto Pad B anyway? Well, as tweeted out by SpaceX, this ship will soon perform a static fire of all 6 Raptor engines. That's a little unexpected, I will say, seeing as the newer ships in production have so many improvements. Could this actually be the next to take flight? Let me know what you think. Alright, so let's head over to Starbase. Work continued rapidly this past week with more pilings being dug and rebar going in. That includes this one here, being lowered into the pilings right beneath the orbital launch mount. By now, there are well over a dozen pilings dug out, with what looks to be almost 2 between each orbital launch mount leg on the outside, and then there's the pilings beneath also following a very neat pattern. From what we can see from the water deluge system at the Sanchez site, it looks like the steel sandwich could potentially sit on metal stands. Those would then sit on top of the thick concrete slab made right from the top of the pilings. It's really exciting to see all of the different parts being assembled together at last. It really does look like SpaceX is aiming to have all of this ready to go as soon as the foundation work is all wrapped up. Now, I just want to lead you over to Ryan Hansen's terrific breakdown of how he believes all these parts fit together. It's a fascinating read that I've got linked here below in how he came to all of the conclusions for what we see here. Essentially, each of these huge manifolds with 18 outlets would enter into each plate segment, the 9 verticals running right into the side, and the 9 lower ones running 45 degrees into the bottom of the steel sandwich. Looking inside, these strong supports allow water flow to travel largely unhindered, and given the overall shape, we can assume that at this point there will be 6 of these to be completed, allowing water to evenly enter the steel sandwich from all sides of the orbital launch mount. From here, the evidence is a tad fuzzier, seeing that we are all still waiting for more parts to show up, but Ryan thinks that each of these 6 sections will have a triangular part added onto each of them to meet right in the middle, completing the entire structure. The big challenge, of course, and the reason that we are watching the orbital launch mount foundation work so closely, is that this would be what they really need to do to have all of this plumbed up to the water supply. Getting around all the existing pipework can be quite the challenge, seeing that this was an unplanned addition to the launch site. However, parts of that have since already been removed. Just yesterday, SpaceX tweeted this brand new video. What you are seeing here is a Raptor engine aimed straight at a water-cooled steel plate over at the McGregor facility. To me, that does look like some sort of shower head setup pushing out water at multiple angles, right where the exhaust hits the plate there. If SpaceX does use angled holes in the plate, this may be the simplest way to avoid water spraying directly up into the engines. Now, even before the big flight test, these high-pressure tanks were moved close to their final resting position. It may have taken SpaceX longer than they had originally hoped, but this week, here they were, installed next to the 2 sets of 4 white gas tanks. All these tanks are most likely supplying the high-pressure gas that is required to build up the huge pressure for that gigantic showerhead. Speaking of high-pressure tanks, just look at these ones here. They were being lifted from the top of the fluids bunker. A reasonably safe bet here is that these tanks and multiple others got damaged from the concrete that landed right on top of them after the flight. So, a few prototype construction updates for you from the build site. It was time for the Common Dome to be stacked with Ship 29. SpaceX are still heavily investing into this new 2-point lifter method. However, in this case, they needed to use extra straps on the 2 normal lifting points that aren't covered in the heat shield tiles. Those straps were possibly needed due to how hard it would be to help keep this top-heavy assembly level. Soon after, it was spinning on the turntable as those sections were welded together. In the next bay over, Booster 11's methane tank was lifted, stacking it to a total height of 9 rings, just one more stack from completing the methane tank component. Above that, it looks like the Mega Bay is finally getting its glass installed, as we hinted at recently. It's going to be nice to see all that external scaffolding being taken down once that is fully finished up. So, last week we talked a bit about Musk's Raptor 3 announcement, but we haven't yet explored what this means for the full stack Starship. With a potential of 269 tons of thrust for each Raptor, we simply need to multiply that by 33 engines to see that the thrust capability in such a scenario is well above what is needed to lift the full stack, estimated to be around 5,000 tons, off the pad at a reasonable rate. A thrust to weight ratio around 1.5 would be very effective, but at a staggering total of 8,877 tons of thrust, well, that puts the potential thrust to weight ratio up at around 1.775. Kind of overkill. Now, I think this old tweet from Elon is the reason why they are pushing harder with Raptor performance. Back here, he was saying that SpaceX would stretch the ship design to be taller, perhaps by 10 meters. He had also added that they would likely add another 3 vacuum engines to the ship like so. Now, if most of that extended space was all for propellant load, it could mean an extra 500 tons or so. That would bring our thrust to weight ratio down a little over 1.6. That would mean that they could comfortably throttle them down to 95% or so and still have plenty of power. Now this week it was reported that SpaceX hired recently retired Kathy Leaders, who was former head of NASA's Human Spaceflight Division. This is actually the second time that something like this has happened recently. In 2020, SpaceX had also hired Bill Gerstenmaier, who was the former chief of human spaceflight at NASA. Kathy here will be a general manager at the Texas Starbase facility, now reporting to Gwen Shotwell, SpaceX's president. I think that is a pretty amazing career, with Kathy overseeing the Crew Dragon missions. Yep, that means that she has already got pretty vast experience with SpaceX, yet another confidence boost to the ambitious Starship program in general. We had some double Starlink action this week, with both version 1.5 satellites, followed by the third ever Starlink version 2 mini mission. The first of the two missions kicked off at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. More on that in just a moment, but real quick, a massive thank you to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. A virtual private network, or VPN, is an application that keeps your internet browsing secure while also unlocking parts of the web that would otherwise be hidden from you. Perhaps content that is simply restricted from your location due to a geographic block. There's also a number of situations where some shows are available from only other countries, but not your own. Well, with Surfshark VPN, all you need to do is simply change the region or country that you are viewing the internet from, and that is it. You are now spoilt for choice once again. There are other combined services here too. Sick of pop-ups or being hounded by hidden malware harming your devices? Surfshark's Clean Web and Safe Search feature will help you circumvent these threats, enabling you to freely browse without a second thought. They provide all of this, and on top of that, a single subscription will give you unlimited use for all of your devices simultaneously. If you are considering a new VPN or changing your existing VPN, just go to surfshark.deal/Marcus and use code Marcus to get 3 extra months for free. You even get a 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the description below. So yes, this first mission was loaded up with the regular version 1.5 satellites. This booster, number 1067, flying on its 11th mission here, and just check out this bizarre tracking shot. Soon enough we get to see Falcon 9 score another bullseye, this time on Just Read the Instructions, and the second stage there off to deploy the satellites. A few neat updates about Starlink in general. Good news to all the gamers out there, because Elon tweeted this week that the goal is to get Starlink's latency all the way down to less than 20 milliseconds. With more satellites in orbit and ground stations available, this is all possible. This all comes after the recent new priority plans were announced, which essentially comes with unlimited standard speed data. It is recommended though that those users would need to pick up the $2,500 high performance internet receiver, which will improve the speed, latency, and work in a broader range of conditions. I will say the user base is getting pretty crazy now, with Starlink announcing that they had passed 1.5 million customers around the globe. It kind of amazes me how much impact Starlink is making, and I think it's going to be one of those technologies that people sort of blindly get used to on aircraft, trains, and ships without even realizing just how freaking amazing this is. Just this week, there was information dropped about there soon being 150 plus cruise ships around the world that are set to use Starlink. So we then had the second Starlink flight for the week as we ticked over into the wee hours of Friday morning, again from Cape Canaveral, but this time launching the brand new Starlink version 2 mini satellites for the third time ever. Booster 1076 on its 5th flight landed smoothly, this time on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas. Now, I've been kind of hoping all this time that we would see some more footage of the deployment mechanism for these V2s, but sadly, still nothing since the first tweet. Apart from this glimpse of them at fairing deployment, that was about it. Unlike the previous Starlink versions that have got these discarded rods that fly off and become space debris for a few years, the new versions, looking from the top down, looks like this. This was the video shared after the very first version 2 mini flight, and you can see the full rectangular rod bracket system that swings away. We believe that that stays attached to be deorbited with the second stage rather than just being thrown off to the side. Breaking news, of course, from NASA, who just yesterday announced that Blue Origin have been selected as the second provider, along with SpaceX, to build a human landing system. All, of course, as part of the Artemis program to have astronauts finally back on the lunar surface. This one is intended to be used on the Artemis 5 mission. Now, I won't say that I'm overly surprised, but I was wondering if we would see Dynetics maybe having a chance. In the end, though, Blue Origin is huge, and they are integrated with those like United Launch Alliance for engine supply. You can see the lander mock-up is vastly different from what we've seen in the past. No huge ladder forcing them to climb up to the top of the vehicle anymore. So yes, it's nice to put this strange design to rest. And I think an awesome point is the emphasis on this here. They are going to develop and fly solar-powered 20-degree Kelvin cryocoolers and other technologies required to prevent liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen boil-off. As I've talked about in a bunch of other deep dive videos before, this is absolutely critical technology required for any human long-duration mission, Starship included. So yes, congrats to Blue Origin, that is huge news, but I want to know what you think about this. It is finally time for them to really prove that they can take on SpaceX. Last week, the Vulcan Centaur was rolled back out to the launch pad at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. As you can see in these beautiful shots here, this was a final wet dress rehearsal. Soon enough, both the first stage and the second stage Centaur 5 tanks were filled and all the important rehearsals were done, including simulating all the propellant loading and launch operations until right before the two BE-4 engines would normally fire up. Later on, Tory Bruno tweeted out that they had good tanking tests, but will need to adjust a handful of set points for a reliable flight readiness firing of those engines. It does seem like we are getting close to that maiden flight, but not as close as we were initially hoping. In April, a test article inside this rig underwent this high-energy event when a hydrogen leak inside found an ignition source. That caved in the tank's forward dome and it also damaged the rig itself. Currently, it seems that ULA is aiming to launch sometime this summer. This is a mission that I just can't wait to watch play out, not just for the Vulcan Centaur's maiden flight, but also for the awesome payloads that are going to be on board. Astrobotic's Peregrine lunar lander will be the main one to watch, and 2 demonstration satellites for Amazon's Project Kuiper. Now, I was pretty thrilled to see this. Space communication is finally taking some significant strides and changing for the better. In this test, NASA was able to achieve a downlink of 200 gigabits per second thanks to the T-Bird SmallSat and the teams behind this mission. The T-Bird, or the Terabyte Infrared Delivery System, was launched into orbit on SpaceX's Transporter 5 mission. It's actually only really tiny, about the size of a tissue box, but it's helped make very giant leaps in the realms of laser communications. In fact, it was only last year that the team were able to achieve a 100 gigabit per second throughput between this satellite in orbit and the ground station on Earth. It can pass over the ground station twice per day for about 6 minutes at a time. And in just those 6 minutes, T-Bird can transfer over 2 terabytes of data. That is pretty crazy, isn't it? I guess the big question that people may have is this new fancy way of data transferring actually necessary? After all, we've been using radio waves to communicate with humans, spacecraft and satellites in outer space all this time. The bandwidth, though, is limited, and with evolving technology, the amount of data that we are acquiring and transferring back home is increasing tremendously. Seeing as we are heading back to the moon, hopefully Mars and beyond, we want spacecraft to have the latest high-speed technology. We are now recording state-of-the-art imagery and scanning data, so we need a communication system with faster downlinks and less interference. Quite often, it is the case that the transmission windows to transfer data can be quite short, especially with these types of orbits that have only got a tiny period where there is line of sight to the ground station. Using this advanced method of communication is going to make a world of difference. We are essentially, of course, talking about space lasers utilizing infrared light, much higher frequency, so you can pack a lot more into the transmission compared to radio waves. There's some more benefits too. The equipment needed is smaller, lighter, and it requires less power. Now, because the transmission beam is more focused and secure, it does need to be targeted with increased precision, but given the ground equipment needed is comparatively low cost, there are so many benefits to this. You might actually be asking why we haven't been using this tech for years, given that fibre optic covers the world like a living nervous system. Well, one hassle that does come with this technology is that, unlike radio waves, infrared lasers can be easily distorted by the atmosphere. Teams at NASA and other partners involved are using protocols to help minimise this, and even the ground station is located on Table Mountain in California to minimise the cloud and atmospheric interference. For space communications though, in a full vacuum, the benefits are super obvious. Now, just last month, I talked about iSpace's Hakuto R lunar lander that unfortunately made a hard landing on the moon. Along with that, you'll probably recall that I talked a lot about NASA's Lunar Flashlight CubeSat that hitched a ride along with it. Well, unfortunately, NASA is now ending the Lunar Flashlight CubeSat mission. This little CubeSat, which was about the size of a briefcase, was to use near-infrared lasers and an onboard spectrometer to map ice that is in permanently shadowed areas of the moon's south pole. Now, its miniature propulsion system, which was the first of its kind, was unable to generate enough thrust. Most likely, it seems, due to some kind of debris getting into the fuel lines. So that meant that getting into a planned lunar orbit to study the South Pole was out of the question, but NASA did come up with a strategy to use whatever propulsion the CubeSat did have to make frequent flybys of the lunar South Pole while in an orbit around the Earth. Again, despite months of effort, NASA just couldn't complete the maneuvers to stay inside the Earth-Moon system, and they've had to end the mission. These technology demonstrations are, as stated by NASA, higher risk and higher reward, so I'm sure that we're going to see similar missions pop up again soon. Now, remember to keep your eyes out for Axiom Space's second mission to the ISS, hopefully coming in a few days. Axiom 2 has been pushed a few times now, but we are getting very close. This mission is going to take the crew of 4 up to the International Space Station for around 10 days or so. That is coming very shortly. So that is it today, my friends. What was your favourite topic of the week? It's great to see all that action at Starbase, along with another launch for the Starlink V2 Minis. Did I miss anything, or is there a topic that you would like me to dive into further? Let me know. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button there so I get to keep making them for you, slowly but surely moving towards that 500,000. If you would like to help directly with what the team and I are doing here, all these support methods make a huge difference to us. Very awesome of you. If you would like to continue the journey today, the algorithm thinks that you will enjoy this video here, or maybe those videos there. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.